on too? Good. I'm gonna put it on, sorry.
Access the Wi-Fi here?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
How do you type that?
I have no idea. I honestly copied it over.
Oh, okay.
I got on my hotspot for a second and then it's like they had to make it as confusing as
Yeah,
possible.
that's ridiculous. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. I've got an audit, and you know, let's just be honest. Audits aren't really all that exciting as a general rule, but today we do have an audit of the Division of Motor Vehicles. I'm incredibly proud of the work that the team has put forth with this effort, and I'm joined on stage by some of our audit leaders. Audit Director Vernon Utley, who's at my direct right, Audit Director Jared Cronk, Audit Director Katie Gleason, Audit Manager Peter Gross, Audit Manager Kaylee Sproul, and Senior Auditor Ann Corbley is present, as well as Auditor Keith Mansa, who's in the room today. In total, we had about 20 auditors and specialists working on this DMV audit. And this is our first step at the DMV and our first stab. We've got more to do, but we analyzed everything, including the full DMV budget, which can be found at appendix, in the appendix of the 435-page audit at page 257. As many of you know, in my previous service, I served as chair of the board of UNC Chapel Hill, and where at the university level, we always talked and often talked about the ability to leverage our public institutions of higher learning here in North Carolina to help improve the quality of life of all of our citizens. So consistent with that notion, as part of this audit, we asked and the team asked and they agreed, and we were able to engage the Institute for Transportation Research and Education, Dr. Daniel Finley, who's also present here today from NC State University, the Bryan School of Business and Economics at UNC Greensboro. Dr. Joy Bedori is present here today. And we also engaged the UNC School of Government. I want to thank Dean Amy Wall for her assistance with that. Let me also say that Governor Stein and I have had a lot of conversations about the DMV. He has been incredibly helpful. I will say even more helpful has been new and should be, because it's his job, DMV Commissioner Paul Tyne. He's been fantastic to work with. I think he's a really good choice to lead the DMV. He's got a lot of energy. And Secretary of Transportation Joy Hopkins has been instrumental in helping our team. I want to also thank Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger, Senator Dan Blue, Minority Leader Sidney Batch, Senators Vicki Sawyer, Michael Lazzara, Bill Rabin, and Todd Johnson. And on the House side, Speaker Destin Hall, House Majority Leader Brendan Jones, Minority Leader Robert Reeves, Representatives Jay Adams, Frank Eiler, Jeff McNeely, Phil Shepard, and Steve Tyson, along with Representative Alan Branson, who I know have worked really hard on DMV issues. But by far, however, the most thanks goes to the men and women who work every day at DMVs across our state. As part of the audit, our team fanned out across the state of North Carolina and engaged those individuals in one-on-one conversations in driver's license offices across the state of North Carolina. And guess what? They had some great ideas. They really know what they're doing at the ground level, and they have some fantastic ideas that we believe can help every single North Carolinian and make DMV more efficient. It's no secret I campaigned on the idea of auditing the DMV. But this effort with respect to the State Auditor's Office will not be isolated to just the DMV. This is an effort to make the State Auditor's Office relevant to everyday North Carolinians. We want to perform audits that matter. This is, however, clearly our first stab at a comprehensive type audit that seeks to inject relevance into the Office of the State Auditor. The DMV is the most customer-facing government agency in the state. And if this audit and our efforts do nothing else, folks, if this audit does nothing and falls flat, I will say this in a proud way, that this office has led the effort in shining a light and putting an emphasis on the fact that our DMV needs reform and that action needs to be taken. DMV affects the economy of North Carolina and the reputation of our state. You know, I woke up this morning early, probably 5:30, about normal for me, and where's WRAL? Are you here? Laura Levine was on TV this morning, and in the background was a line of people at Avent Ferry who had camped out or gotten there at 4 in the morning to try to get into the DMV to get help. You know, I was also watching TV and turning the channels last night. I see that CBS is doing a comedy show on the DMV. Well, folks, we've got to do better than that. Our DMV serves 8.6 million North Carolinians, and we have about 350 people that move here each and every day to our state. The DMV is an issue that at all levels of government we have agreement, and that we owe the people of North Carolina a fix to the DMV. We're releasing today what is officially a two-part audit. There will be additional audits of the DMV as we move forward, looking at things, for example, like license plate agencies. But these first two, which are really three in total, are an audit of information systems, a performance audit of the licensing and issuing function of DMV, and we have a full detail of the budget and spending of the DMV that is included in the appendix. We put it in the appendix because by its very nature, the data is about a year in date, but the budget analysis is instructive to the overall DMV story, and we wanted to make sure that that data was included. Our audit tells a story. We show how customer experience is deteriorating worse than we had even known, and how DMV employees are grappling with a growing workload, and how staffing issues are hurting the DMV and customers. This audit highlights how DMV management has struggled to improve its IT infrastructure, and ultimately we show a systematic breakdown and historically fractured relationship between the DMV and the Department of Transportation, where the DMV is housed. Now let me stop and say this right here. This is not a personality-based issue. I have found Commissioner Paul Tyne and Secretary Joe Hopkins to work really well together. They've also worked with our team exceptionally well, and I do think that they are committed to doing what's right on behalf of the people of North Carolina. But in making recommendations from the State Auditor's Office, we can't isolate our recommendations to particular personalities. It has to be recommendations that are based on ultimate long-term structure. The DMV particularly has gotten notably worse over the last 5 years. We had a constituent contact our office, for example. Her name is Letitia, and she had tried to get her driver's license renewed from November to May. So think about that time period. During one visit, she actually saw more than 100 people turned away. So she took it upon herself to call. She actually got the phone number of a particular DMV employee and called every single day for 2 to 3 weeks until she finally was able to slip in and get her driver's license. We have here today Erin Van Horen. Erin, come on up, and when I ask her to share her experience with the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Thank you. I had a 16-year-old son at the time, and he was trying to get his driver's license. Didn't think it was going to be that big of an ordeal. Our first visit, we had an appointment 2.5 hours away because that was the only available time we could get. He was ready. We had everything to go. Perfect timing for us. We got there. No worker was there available to perform the test, the road test. So they said, you're going to have to go back to the system. So that's 1 day out of school and 1 day out of work for me. Our second visit was 3 hours away towards the mountains because that was the only appointment I could get. When we got there, their system was down. So they couldn't take us then. So that's 2 days out of school, 2 days out of work for me. The third visit, we were informed to go to Lillington because they have a no appointment required. We got there early at 6:30 in the morning. There were dozens of people camped out. Like you said, people, one minute had spent the night there, sleeping bags. It was crazy. And 7:45, they come up with a sign that says no workers. Oh, it was awful. And then our fourth visit, I was able to get an appointment in Mount Airy. And I live in Holly Springs, so this is all a lot of traveling. We got the appointment, waited over 2.5 hours with an appointment, and was able to finally get his license. But since then, they have restrictions on licenses where you can't drive after 9 for a certain amount of time. We have attempted 3 times to go to the DMV to get that released, and we just can't get in. And my son has missed a total of 4 days of school and 4 days of work without even getting his license out of provisional. He's going to be 18 this year, so we're just honestly winging it. But it's just been a very big ordeal for us, and we cannot seem to get an appointment anywhere for any more appointments for his renewal that's coming up in 2 years. So that's been the biggest problem for us, is just availability and the, from what we were told, lack of workers.
Thank you, Aaron. It's ErinVanHoren is how she spells her name, and she is a North Carolinian. And that goes to the point of why I decided when I ran for office that we would focus on the DMV. Our subject matter experts analyze data to determine how long customers typically remain at each driver's license location. If you look through the audit, there's a detailed map illustrating those issues. I'm not going to go through all the facts because we'll be here all day, and I could talk about this stuff all day. I really could, because again, I never thought I'd want to be the state auditor or really get jazzed about doing this stuff, but to me this stuff is fascinating and it's important. One thing to note as an overall issue that our audit found, and that is a lack of detailed and measurably relevant metrics at the DMV. That really should be a headline across the state of North Carolina. As I've been in office now 7 months. We started this audit 6 months ago, so this is a 6-month work product. We started the 1st of February with this. We're seeing a lack of metrics and measurabilities across the state of North Carolina. You know, we need measurable data so that managers can know what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and so they can look at it and see exactly what needs to be done to move, to use a sports analogy, the ball down the field. And you know, private business uses metrics, and in this day of data analytics and the use of high-speed computers, the state of North Carolina's got to get on board with data analytics and metrics across the state. So, but we're able to glean some informative issues. We found that statewide average customer service visits actually exceeded 1 hour and 15 minutes, which is up 15.4% from 2019. Now, I want to note here that this is DMV data based on when individuals actually check in the license office, right? This doesn't include how long you have to wait outside if you're there for a show-up. We also found that 13.8% of customer visits exceeded 2.5 hours in the year 2025, which is a 79% increase statewide. We found that 47.5% of driver's license office transactions in fiscal year 2025 were customers not visiting their closest office, and that 14% of rural customers traveled outside of their service area for more than an hour. Over the past 5 years, customer experience has been measurably declining, a trend closely linked to both increased population and persistent structural and governance challenges. The employee experience has diminished as well. Employees, in our talk with them, cited low salary, burnout, security concerns, lack of support, and inadequate training. If you look at salaries, the average salary remains below $50,000 for examiners in both rural and urban areas. You can see the appendix at page 300 for a detailed chart of the DMV pay. I have that chart with me here. If you go to the appendix at page 300, it shows a detailed analysis of that pay. Quite frankly, the state should evaluate market-based salaries and an approach to paying these positions, because frankly, many positions across the state are in different metropolitan and local areas. I mean, let's be just honest about it. It costs more to live in Charlotte than it does in rural eastern North Carolina, and we need to look at it from a pay standpoint of what we pay folks to get the job done. Examiners have also described customers lunging at them, and in one instance, a customer actually kicked a glass pane in, And in another incident, a customer followed a license examiner out behind the DMV license office. These folks, these hardworking men and women who are serving the people of North Carolina, are facing increasingly stressful and occasionally hostile work environments. And it really, really, really needs to get better. And so we will, and I know, let me just say this, I know Governor Stein, Commissioner Tyne, and Secretary Hopkins are fully on board with this, and they understand that. But DMV is operating on an unsustainable staffing model. Current DMV workforce levels are insufficient to meet the needs of North Carolinians. There are several issues at play, clearly, and it's been reported, some news outlets here have gotten it right, that over the past 20 years, our population has increased by 2.5 million people. However, during that same period, license examiner positions have only increased by 52 positions. That's only half the problem. Right now, there are approximately 160 total vacant examiner positions. Those are empty slots. The DMV has to have more employees in its office, and those vacant positions need to be filled. You know, one of the things we did in the state auditor's office, we redesigned an administrative position to be a full-time recruiter. And I think that's a great idea for DMV as well. We want to make sure we have the best and brightest working in the state auditor's office, and we want somebody full-time recruiting folks to come work for the state. Specifically, however, we identified 12 service areas where recruitment and retention efforts should be focused for maximum impact. You can find that on page 21 of the audit. Let me give you a really stark example. In Harnett County, there's one license examiner to serve 56,000 residents. Let me repeat that. One license examiner to serve 56,000 residents. Again, page 21, table 4 sort of breaks that down. It's not sustainable. And DMV's reliance on temporary positions creates challenges for Commissioner Tyne. He needs flexibility to be able to move those positions around and make those positions permanent. These temporary positions are harder to fill. They come with fewer benefits and create extra training costs. You know, to that end, the legislature has appropriated 40 additional license examiners and the expansion of license offices, and that bill is on the governor's desk now. I say that's a good start, but Commissioner Tyne needs additional positions and he needs additional flexibility. You know, creativity and innovation is the only way we'll get to the finish line and make DMV better and more efficient. And I know the governor shares this thought. We've discussed it. The DMV has struggled with technology as well. Our information systems audit shows IT modernization efforts at the DMV have not produced meaningful customer service improvements. Since 2014, the DMV and the Department of Information Technology Transportation Division initiated 46 separate projects that resulted in a cost of approximately $42 million. But even with all the projects, outside experts determine the current DMV mainframe systems are outdated and overdue for replacement. And by the way, that's symptomatic across state government. We got to do better there. But these legacy systems support all the operations, and they're working for the time being. And I've talked with Commissioner Tyne, and I agree with him that operationally we've got to get these licenses issued quicker before we dive fully deep into the technology fix, but that technology fix needs to remain on the front burner. Operationally, the technology at DMV is frozen in time, and it hinders efforts across the board for stakeholders. But the biggest issue that our team identified, and this came not only from stakeholders across state government, but from people that work in the DMV on the front lines, is the relationship between DMV and DOT. This is a governance structure issue that adds too much bureaucratic red tape to the equation. There are 4 systematic challenges stemming from the DMV's governance structure as a division of DOT. And let me stop here and say, I am aware, and I certainly respect Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins' disagreement with this recommendation. Actually, if you look at their response, they agree with every single recommendation we make except this one, and I certainly understand and respect that. But The current structure limits the strategic input of the DMV. Of the 45 performance milestones in the DOT strategic plan for 2023 to 25, only 2 of the 45 directly pertain to DMV operations. They have restricted budgetary autonomy. DMV relies on DOT to submit budget requests, but only 31% of DMV staffing requests were included in DOT's budget request. Insufficient performance data. DOT left out DMV customer service satisfaction data in its performance report. Exclusion from key process modernization initiatives. DMV was excluded from planning and procurement phases of improvement efforts led by the DOT. Again, these are not personality based, and I'm fully aware that Secretary Hopkins is new to the job over the last 6 months, and Commissioner Tyne is new to the job. But this has been a legacy issue at the DMV, between the DMV and the DOT. The governance structures have contributed and will continue to contribute to customer and operational challenges, modernization delays, employee burnout, and negative impacts on North Carolina's economy. DOT needs the DMV, not the other way around. DMV currently generates 30% of DOT's revenues, but accounts for only 3% of the expenditures while lacking sufficient operational authority. DMV collects more than $3.5 billion each year, which includes $1.3 billion in vehicle taxes. You know, when you go and you get your registration, you pay your tax through the DMV to the county. But it also remits $2.2+ billion every year to the DOT, while DMV's total expenditures are roughly $200 million per year. You can see page 267 for a detailed analysis of that in the appendix. I would note that the $28 million per year has now been shifted to the State Highway Patrol through license and theft. But the fact remains the relationship isn't working. There have been several different DMV and DOT leadership iterations over the years. Again, I believe that Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins are really working well together, but we need to organize our DMV and our DOT for whoever takes those positions. Our recommendations consider all the issues laid out in our audits, and we included specific instructions that establish timelines for the impacted parties to adopt. First, we'd ask that policymakers consider establishing the DMV as an autonomous agency or authority with direct control over its budget, strategic planning, and operations. Those specific next steps include requiring the DMV and DOT to deliver an initial transition plan within 6 months. While DMV and DOT leadership oppose this, our recommendations include the development of a detailed transition plan to proactively address the risks. Second, DMV leadership should adopt a comprehensive strategic plan, and I know Commissioner Tyne is hard at work on this. This needs to be independent of DOT and should include measurable goals, performance metrics, and a draft should be delivered to the General Assembly and the Governor within 9 months. Third, DMV should conduct an in-depth staffing analysis and multi-year staffing plan to address examiner shortages, identify staffing needs by location, convert temporary examiner roles to permanent, and adjust pay structures when needed. This should be submitted to the General Assembly and Governor's Office within 6 months. Fourth, the DMV should build and maintain a performance dashboard. Now let me stop here and say I know that there's people calling me Dashboard Dave, and I'm fine with that, because I do believe that a dashboard provides accountability. And so we are calling on a dashboard to be created to track customer visit duration, appointment availability and scheduling trends, customer satisfaction, staffing availability and examiner productivity, and online service usage and adoption rules. Look, people don't respect what you don't inspect. The general public and the stakeholders across North Carolina need to know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. With computer technology and the information age that we live in today, this is not too much for us to ask of our state agencies. Lastly, DMV should develop and implement a customer service experience improvement plan. And some things, look, the DMV is already doing, and I've talked to Commissioner Tyne about it. I know I keep repeating myself when I say that, but I do want you to know how hard I do believe Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins are working on this. You know, the staffing model needs to leverage facilitators, and they're doing that. That is where you have a greeter that helps the folks that are waiting in line to make sure they don't wait 8 hours. They may wait 30 minutes or 2 hours. If they don't have the right documentation, they need to be told early on so they don't sit there all day. They're implementing periodic weekend and longer hours, and that's important. But there are several other customer experience improvements that should be included. Service differentiation is really important. That is, you know, if you have, for example, a rural DMV office that has a limited number of examiners, we recommend that the DMV look at doing a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for example, for renewals and real IDs, and then a Thursday for driver's tests for 16-year-olds, and then maybe a Friday for commercial driver's license tests. Differentiate these. One of the things we've got to do in North Carolina is get over the crest of the backlog of folks that need IDs. We need to have incentives to encourage online transactions. Right now it costs more to do things online than it does in person. Revised appointment management strategies, that's a no-brainer. On the ground, a lot of the examiners even tell us that they'd just soon not even have the appointment process. They would rather move people in and out as they show up in line, because we've got to get to the point in our DMV offices where people are waiting on the DMV license examiner, not the license examiner waiting on folks to show up, because there's plenty of people in line that need to be served. Enhanced communication by signage and using digital tools on the ground, and innovative service pilots like pop-up DMV events. You know, we've all been to the Halloween Spirit store. In North Carolina, we have a lot of anchor retail spaces that are open and some large shopping center areas that are open. There's no reason why we can't take new tranches of DMV license examiners and put them in regional pop-up locations to move people through to get their driver's license renewed or to get a real ID in an expedient manner. Additionally, we would have the benefit of helping that particular local economy in that particular shopping area because there would be an influx of people. People can wait inside with air conditioning or inside with heat. Got to evaluate new technology systems. The more we can do online, the better. The technology exists. For example, in the airport, there's a service called Clear. I use it. Now, to be sure, they're using our real ID information to provide that Clear, but that type of technology can also be reverse engineered to help our license examiners move folks through to get their license. And we need to consider premium service options. Explore a pilot, FastPass style way of obtaining a license quicker through a private third party, such as a license plate agency where citizens can pay a fee to obtain a license quicker. Look, we already do that. We have TSA PreCheck, we have toll roads, we charge a premium on all kinds of things, and I think now is the time to explore that. We include also some common sense actionable items like amending the statutory 30-day validity of driving eligibility certificates. That would be North Carolina General Statutes 20-11, subset N3. Currently, the general statute requires students under the age of 18 applying for a permit or license to possess a driving eligibility certificate that is dated within 30 days of the application for permit. This just quite frankly needs to be eliminated. If you can't get an appointment, there's no way for that 30-day time period is just too short. Also, individuals should not really have to go in person 3 times before turning 18 in person to get a driver's license. We got to reform that statutory process. We also have talked with Commissioner Tyne, and I will tell you that the DMV is working really hard to authorize third-party testers to administer the skills test. We found that, for example, in South Carolina, look, there is a complete regulatory and licensing scheme for folks that train drivers on how to drive, whether it's at the public schools or whether if you're at a private school, use a private driving school. There's no reason why those individuals who spend several hours, minimum of 6 hours, with those individuals in the car can't certify that they've actually passed the driver's test. We found, for example, that an examiner can process 4 to 5 renewals or real IDs in an hour. But that road test for the 16-year-old typically takes a minimum of 35 minutes. And for a commercial driver, it takes a minimum of 45 minutes. So eliminating that 35-minute time frame and that 45-minute time frame are really actionable steps. And by the way, the DMV can do that without statutory change. And we talked with Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins, and they're hard at work on that right now. We talked with DMV leadership. I think they really are on top of this. We included information on DMV kiosks showing that the goal has been to attain 500 users per month, but that goal is still not being met after 2 years. It averages about 371 uses a month. I think we need to reevaluate the validity and use of the kiosks. And if we are going to use them, they might be better served to actually be at the license agency itself, because that's where the market is, right? You're just you're catching fish that are floating by, so to speak. Individuals that just go into the grocery store. Folks are lining up at the DMV. I think those kiosks could be better used there. A detailed customer experience improvement plan should be submitted within 6 months. Additionally, our information systems audit includes 4 recommendations for the DMV on their information systems, and altogether these recommendations implemented in full provide a real opportunity to improve the customer experience at the DMV. You can find those in our audit. But I can't stress enough, fixing the DMV is going to take buy-in from all levels of government, and I do agree with the governor. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next month, but it can happen quick. We've seen, for example, the response that our legislature and our citizens have given to Western North Carolina when we have a disaster. Folks, the DMV is at that level of emergency in the state of North Carolina because our DMV affects the economy. It affects people having to take off of work unnecessarily. It takes our students out of the classroom. This has to be fixed, and it has to be of top priority. That includes DMV, DOT, legislature, and the governor's office. As an independent office, we can give recommendations and point out data, flaws, opportunities, and so on. Our office stands ready to assist with data analytics at the highest level, and we welcome the opportunity to engage with policymakers to provide insight on data that they need to competently and efficiently make change. This brings to mind a story, many of you may know it, of the pot roast. And the pot roast story goes something like this. Young lady is fixing pot roast for her friends. And while she's doing it, she takes the meat cleaver and she cuts the end off the pot roast and puts it in her pot and cooks it. And her friend asked her, "So, I see you put those spices in there and you got it on the stove. Why'd you cut the end off the pot roast?" She said, "Well, I'm not sure. That's the way my mom always did it." So the next time the young lady was with her mom, she asked the question, "Why'd you cut the end off the pot roast?" The mom replied clearly and quickly, "I cut the end off the pot roast because otherwise the pot roast is not going to fit in my pot. I have no idea why you cut the end off the pot roast." The point being is, we can't keep doing things the same old way. We've got to be creative and use innovation. And, you know, I do want to say that the DMV ultimately provides not a problem, but an opportunity for the people of North Carolina and for the government of North Carolina to get it right. We're committed to seeing these recommendations through and implemented. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
You haven't been able to look at all this. You said about 5 years ago things started.
435-page audit, by the way. Hey, by the way, who said the state auditor's office wasn't doing stuff, right? We've been busy.
You said that things started to go south about 5 years ago. It's about the time the DMV headquarters was moved to Rocky Mount. Did you find any impact from the turnover that caused or from being so far away from it?
We did, and in fact, I talked to the team about this morning. We were going through. They lost a lot of experienced people that just weren't willing to move to Rocky Mount. So they did. The DMV as a whole did experience a ramp-up period where they had to bring in people to that particular location in Rocky Mount, and that was part of it. Quite frankly, I think part of it also has been just this anchor of technology being old, right? I mean, you know, there has to be political will and actually, you know, sort of rubber meets the road will to change legacy technology. I mean, the DMV's structure and bones is based on COBOL. That's the stuff that's, I think, one step ahead. You got to help me with this, Doc. It's one step ahead of TRS 80, right? I mean, folks, we got to do better. We just have to do better. And I know, look, it takes time to do this, and it takes money. All right? But we've shown when we have a need. We saw it this past year in Western North Carolina. When we have a need and we've got something that's emergency, look, I'll go back to what I saw this morning. I saw people camped out in line in front of the Avent Ferry DMV. That's not acceptable in North Carolina. And I know the governor believes that, and I know that the Secretary of Transportation and Commissioner believe that, and I know the legislature believes that. It's time for everybody to get in the room and let's solve it.
I'm curious, you talk a lot about technology. When it comes to actually rolling that out and implementing it, how do you plan to do that? And do you plan to test it first?
Well, I'm not going to personally do it, but we recommend doing this. Look, our recommendation is get started ASAP, and I know Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins are working really hard on that. Again, the impetus behind DMV being pulled out from under DOT is it revolves around accountability. If you've got an agency that's producing in revenue $3.3 billion a year, okay, 1.3 of that is tax money that goes to the counties, but it does produce directly $2.2 billion in revenue that goes to the bottom line of the Department of Transportation. And it is the most customer front and focused agency in state government. Accountability, in our team's opinion, demands that the commissioner answer directly to the governor because it's that important. The way you ramp up, and our team, Peter, you want to answer that on some ideas?
On the technology?
Yeah.
Sure.
Peter is our leader on our IS audit team. He and Vernon actually worked a lot on this. A lot of people don't know that the state auditor does cybersecurity audits across the state of North Carolina, and as part of that, our IS team, our information system team went. So here's Peter Gross.
To just answer your question directly, there is a great need for technology overhaul concerning the mainframe systems that run all of DMV's core functions. Our IT audit for the modernization found that the planning for that modernization is not quite in place. So you're absolutely correct. There will be testing, but first and foremost, DMV needs to put together a plan for what its strategic objectives are for that modernization. Who are the people that are going to be performing it? We have warnings from a failed modernization effort in Minnesota a few years back about what could go wrong if you pull the people that are supposed to be serving the public and instead have them working on the system modernization process.
Is there any sort of timeline for that?
Not yet. That would be on the DMV to determine. I think most of the people responsible for that process and our outside experts we consulted would agree that it would be 4 to 6 years minimum, and that caution would be encouraged in not pulling people away too soon.
And look, that's a good question because that's part of the problem. When you've got a system that may take 4 to 6 years to fully implement, is there political will to start something that's not going to even come to fruition until you may or may not be in office, right, from a political standpoint? So we're going to have some courage and leadership to move forward with this on behalf of the people of North Carolina. I quite frankly think it could be done quicker, and our team has looked at it. We don't want to get out over our skis, but there's modernization efforts on old systems using artificial intelligence that can take that data in and process that old data quicker, which speeds up the process. And we're working with that in our own office through use of AI moving forward. But that's a good question. I wish I had a specific answer, but we do have some timelines. We think this planning needs to happen within 6 months. I mean, it's time to get going. We got to get moving.
As far as the $2 billion that's going from DMV to DOT, presumably DOT is applying that to road construction road maintenance and other things. So, you know, there's a cross-subsidy going on here, but how do you prevent, you know, a DMV problem, you know, from, you know, if you take DMV out of the DOT umbrella, you know, I presume you'd want the money or most of it to stay with DOT so we don't substitute a DMV, you know, a traffic jam problem for a waiting in line at DMV problem.
Yeah, it's a good question, but state dollars are oftentimes fungible. So for example, our office receives approximately $8 to $9 million in revenue, okay? That revenue comes from other state agencies, all right? DMV is a little different. Its revenue comes from the general citizen, okay? And so you're right, DOT is going to need those dollars to sustain certain infrastructure systems. And we're not recommending that all the money be left with. I mean, they don't need $2.2 billion to run the DMV. However, they operate with a pretty austere budget given what they're asked to do on behalf of the citizens at $200 million a year. So, you know, they've got the capacity, for example, to have the resources to pay for what they need. They just need to work together with DMV, the legislature, and the governor's office to parse those dollars out correctly. And if the legislature needs to appropriate additional dollars to fill that gap with DOT or with DMV, I think that's something that should be considered. Look, I was clear early on when the budget process started in Raleigh over at the legislature. We had information in our audit that we weren't quite ready to release the full audit, but I wanted to confirm, yes, we need more DMV license examiners, and yes, we need to pay these folks more. That should be the job people want, right? Because if we've got high functioning, highly paid, appropriately paid DMV workers helping the people of North Carolina, you know, we're going to have happy citizens who are going to be productive, and the economy of North Carolina is still going to be #1 in the nation. Did I answer your question? If I didn't, I'm glad to keep going. I can go on with this forever.
A budget question as well. I think
Sure.
there was a suggestion in the audit about maybe doing a different way in terms of funding DMV. Rather than going through the usual 2-year budget process, they would get a percentage of fees. Could you talk about that, or is this done in other states?
Yeah, it is done in some other states, but the idea behind that, and it's a good question, is incentive-based performance. That's a private business concept. Let's incentivize the DMV to perform. Let's create measurable, realistic, meaningful metrics that DMV can meet, and let's fund the agency and the team members at the DMV that are providing those results accordingly. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I think that would maybe help us move. The idea is let's get moving, right? And I think that's the impetus behind that. Incentive-based.
I have a two-part question on the staffing shortage. First of all, you mentioned market-based salaries. I mean, that seems like a pretty intuitive solution. So why do you think that hasn't happened before? And then the second part is, do you think they should target federal workers in particular who are out of work for jobs at the DMV?
Well, I'll answer both questions. One, market-based salaries, I think, has been discussed in the past. It's been brought up in the legislature before. We live in a modern world, right? And it costs more to live in Mecklenburg County, costs more to live in Wake County, costs more to live in Guilford County than it does in Columbus County, for example. That's just a fact. The State Personnel Act has a lot of problems, does a lot of good things too, but it's got a lot of problems, and I think that goes to even a broader issue of giving managers flexibility to manage their agencies and organizations to get the results. But again, what's missing in the equation are those realistic, measurable metrics so that we can measure the performance, right? You don't want to just give an agency or a manager additional money or put them on an incentive plan without some kind of measurable that gives a data point on a return on investment that can be monitored by the General Assembly, by the governor's office, and for that matter, audited by the state auditor to see how they're performing, right? Second, I think we should have the best qualified folks who want to serve the people of North Carolina working in all levels of state government.
I have a customer experience
That was from check-in at the door. That's correct. Because that's where they were measuring, that's where DMV has been measuring their metrics, is from the time you check in at the door. So it doesn't measure how long you may have waited outside.
I mean, you talked about some of these smaller pop-up offices and kiosks as another means of getting the work of the DMV to the customers in a way that's faster and more efficient. How are those maybe going to be filled if there's these pop-ups at retail spaces when there's already a shortage in staffing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes hand in glove with first, we got to get people employed. We've got to recruit licensed examiners. We got to pay them, right? Okay. Once we get them in, we got to fill them in. We recommend in those 12 sort of hot spots that are listed in our audit on page 21 is a good place to start. And then as we recruit additional DMV staff members, let's pick some real hot spots and try to curb the tide with getting people renewed and getting people real IDs. I mean, the real question also from a public-facing standpoint is, I think the public wants to see that the state of North Carolina is doing something other than the same old way, other than the pot roast. So if we can use some innovative and creative ideas to let the public know that the state of North Carolina is working, I see no downside in trying it.
Returning to the idea of kind of leaving DMV from DOT for our work, how do you believe that the issues with DMV have not been rising to the governor's attention over the last 5 years, and how would kind of that split help with things like morale, help with things like the IT modernization that need to happen?
Well, I mean, I think proof's in what we're seeing. I would assume that if the governor was paying attention to what was going on previously, that something would have been done to assist the DMV. And it may have been at the secretary level where it was stopped. You know, we didn't dive too deep into that. But the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen overnight. These lines didn't start when Governor Stein took office. They started over time. And I quite frankly, you know, think that it's just an issue of focus. You know, sometimes there's a lot of things going on in government and pay attention to a lot of stuff, and I found that to be the case in office. You kind of maybe start something and forget, and then you got to pick it back up, right? So human nature plays a part of that. But look, this is something that's been growing. Again, the technology problem has been there for a long time, and folks have known about it. Multiple governors have known about this, and we just haven't. Whether it's a legislative issue or whether it's a governor issue or just an overall focus issue, you know, that's up for public debate. But I would say today's the day that we've got to get on it. I hope that answered your question. It's been, you can ask me a follow-up. I'm glad to follow up on that.
Taking a look here, excuse me, at your fact sheet. I'm taking a look at a number of these key findings. They all have their respective emphasis. Does any one of these items similarly stick out to you? And with this, where do you start?
Well, so I think you start, number one, with let's make sure that we recruit licensed examiners, right? And we start with those 12 hotspots on page 21. Those are the places that need immediate assistance with people on the ground. Secondly, let's get rid of the driver's test at the driver's license offices. DMV does not need a statutory change to get that done. That'll save 35 minutes from 16-year-olds having to take the driver test. You know, the examiners get to spend about 15 minutes. That's what our study shows with each one of these drivers. The individual who's doing the driving instruction spends a minimum of 6 hours and sometimes more with that individual. You know, when you take a math test in class, the teacher grades your test, right? We trust our teachers to grade the math test. There's no reason why we shouldn't trust the driver's license teachers to certify that the students have passed the basic minimum driving test, right? And that's going to save 35 minutes per examiner. Those are two places to start. And let me just repeat that Commissioner Tyne is on this, and his team is working right now on a plan to do just that. And so we're really encouraged by that. And he's ready and poised to take a leadership role on that front. I think you also have to start with the idea of beginning a pilot project for privatizing the fast pass lane for people to get a driver's license, where they pay a premium to be guaranteed a time slot to get their license. It would seem to me a logical place to start that would be in some license plate agencies that are willing to take that on as an effort. They already have the computer set up and the ability to connect to the DMV. It was just about adding another terminal to their license plate agency. Now, some of these license plate agencies are kind of small, you don't have a lot of room, but there are some where we could engage in a pilot project to get that done. Third, we got to look at this line program and this reservation program. We got to make sure that people are not making multiple reservations and clogging the system, right? And we got to start there, because that can actually run independent of the overall DMV computer system. That can be a standalone system. It needs to be reevaluated to be able to do groupings of folks and move people through the line more efficiently and quicker if we're going to use lines. Or we need to take the recommendation from some of the license examiners that we interviewed across the state and just do away with the reservation system, and let's just start moving people through. I do think the pop-up is really a good idea in the sense of not only showing the public that we're doing stuff, but regionally it can give people a chance to go in and get their license and also wait in line inside instead of outside.
You mentioned that you saw those people on the news this morning standing in line. To those folks, when they hear about an audit, they may not think that that means real change. What is your message to those people who quite literally are still out there standing in line today?
Well, my message to them is that I am their state auditor and I'm a dog with a bone on this DMV, and that we are going to continue to shine a light on the DMV and put this forward front and center on the front burner until it's fixed. I have all the confidence in the world that the governor intends to do that, and that Commissioner Tyne and Secretary Hopkins intend to do it as well. But my job as state auditor, when I took office, I pledged to the people that I would make this office relevant, and we would complete audits and projects that get real results. So with that said, I'm going to be a dog with a bone on the DMV, and we're going to make sure that recommendations are implemented and that the DMV moves forward on behalf of the people of North Carolina. All right. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate it. Again, if you have follow-up questions, just get a hold of Randy today, and I'll be glad to give you an answer through him or take your call directly, one way or the other. Appreciate your time.